The crimson sun hung low over the horizon as Olivia Daniels kicked open the door of Marysville's lone saloon, startling a pair of ravens from their perch on the weathered hitching post. Whiskey-soaked laughter died instantly, replaced by a thick silence that followed her like a shadow as she limped toward the bar. It was 1876 in the Montana Territory, and a woman alone in a saloon was still something of a novelty, especially one with haunted eyes and a Remington revolver strapped to her hip. "Water," she said, her voice rough as the desert terrain she'd spent 3 days crossing. The barkeep raised an eyebrow but filled a glass from the barrel behind him. "That'll be 2 cents," he said, placing it before her with a cautious hand. Olivia slid a nickel across the scarred wooden surface and lifted the glass to cracked lips. Dust clung to her dark hair and the shoulders of her riding clothes, giving her the appearance of a ghost rather than flesh and blood. She'd been riding hard since leaving Helena, determined to outrun memories that pursued her more relentlessly than any outlaw ever could. "You look like you've had a long journey, madam," the barkeep observed, sweeping her nickel into his palm. "Long enough," she replied, not inviting further conversation. Her gaze remained fixed on the water glass, avoiding the curious stares of the saloon's patrons. The piano player in the corner resumed his half-hearted rendition of "Oh, Susanna," and slowly, the murmured conversations returned. Olivia closed her eyes briefly, savoring the momentary respite before she would need to secure lodging for the night. The swing doors parted again, admitting a tall figure silhouetted against the dying sunlight. Even without turning, Olivia sensed the attention in the room shift. The newcomer's spurs clinked softly against the wooden floor as he approached the bar, stopping 2 stools away from her. "Evening, Wade," the barkeep nodded. "The usual, obliged, Frank," came the reply, a deep voice with the gentle cadence of somewhere east of the Mississippi. Olivia kept her eyes forward, but she could feel the stranger's gaze slide briefly over her before returning to the barkeep. She took another sip of water, fighting the instinct to glance his way. "Any rooms available at the boarding house?" she asked the barkeep, anxious to be away from the curious eyes of the saloon. "Mrs. Peterson's likely got space," he replied. 2 blocks down, white house with the blue trim." She nodded, draining the last of her water before standing. A wave of dizziness swept over her and she gripped the bar's edge to steady herself. "You all right there, miss?" the stranger Wade asked, half rising from his stool. "Fine," she said curtly, straightening her spine with effort. 3 days with minimal food and little rest was taking its toll, but she'd be damned if she'd show weakness in front of these men. Wade McCullough watched as the woman pushed away from the bar and walked with deliberate steadiness toward the door. Something about her stirred his curiosity, not just the unusual sight of a lone woman traveling in this territory, but the carefully masked pain in her eyes. He'd seen that look before, in the mirror after the war. "Who's that, Frank?" he asked quietly as the saloon doors swung shut behind her. "Never seen her before today," the barkeep shrugged, placing Wade's whiskey before him. "But she's carrying a mighty big burden, whatever her story is." Wade nodded, lifting the glass to his lips. After 5 years as Marysville's sheriff, he thought he knew every face in the county, and most in the surrounding ones too. Strangers weren't uncommon with the railroad construction bringing workers through, but a woman traveling alone was different. Concerning even, given the dangers that lurked in these parts. "Might want to check on her," Frank suggested, wiping down the bar. "Don't reckon she's eaten in a spell." Wade tossed back his whiskey and placed the glass on the counter. "Reckon you're right," he agreed, dropping a coin beside it before heading to the door. Outside, the last light of day painted the dusty street in hues of orange and purple. He spotted the woman halfway down the block, her determined stride belying the exhaustion evident in the slope of her shoulders. He was about to call out when he saw her steps falter. She swayed once before crumpling to the ground like a marionette with cut strings. Wade covered the distance between them in seconds, kneeling beside her still form. Up close, the signs of her ordeal were even more apparent: sunburned skin stretched tight over fine cheekbones, lips cracked from dehydration, and dark circles beneath her closed eyes. "Miss, can you hear me?" he asked, gently turning her onto her back. Her eyelids fluttered, revealing eyes the color of whiskey. Recognition dawned in them, followed swiftly by alarm. She pushed weakly against his chest. "I'm fine," she insisted, struggling to sit up. "With all due respect, madam, you're about as far from fine as a person can get without being dead," Wade replied, his firm tone softened by concern. "I'm the sheriff here, Wade McCullough. Let me help you to the doctor's office." "No doctors," she said sharply, "just the boarding house." Wade hesitated, torn between respecting her wishes and insisting on medical attention. The determined set of her jaw convinced him that arguing would be futile. With a sigh, he slipped one arm beneath her knees and the other around her shoulders, lifting her as gently as possible. "What are you doing?" she protested weakly. "Taking you to Mrs. Peterson's as requested," he replied. "Though I maintain you ought to see Doc Miller first." Too exhausted to fight, Olivia reluctantly allowed herself to be carried. The sheriff's steady heartbeat beneath her ear was oddly comforting, a reminder of human contact she'd denied herself for too long. "I can walk," she murmured without conviction. "I've no doubt you can under normal circumstances," Wade replied, his long strides eating up the distance to the boarding house. "But these ain't normal circumstances, are they?" Olivia fell silent, closing her eyes against the curious stares of passers-by. Her pride smarted at being carried through town like an invalid, but her body had finally surrendered to days of deprivation. The boarding house was exactly as described, a well-maintained two-story white clapboard with blue trim and a wraparound porch. Wade mounted the steps and knocked on the door with his boot. A plump, gray-haired woman answered, her eyes widening at the sight before her. "Sheriff McCullough, goodness gracious, what's happened?" "Evening, Mrs. Peterson. This lady's in need of a room and some looking after," Wade explained. "She's had a rough journey." "Of course, bring her in." Mrs. Peterson stepped aside, holding the door wide. "I've got the front room available." Wade carried Olivia through a tidy parlor and into a small but comfortable bedroom furnished with a brass bed, washstand, and rocking chair. With great care, he laid her on the quilt-covered bed. "I'll fetch some broth and hot water," Mrs. Peterson said, already bustling toward the kitchen. "Poor dear looks half-starved." Left momentarily alone with the sheriff, Olivia mustered the strength to meet his concerned gaze. "Thank you," she said stiffly. "I can manage from here." Wade studied her face for a long moment. "You got a name, madam?" She hesitated. Olivia Daniels." "Well, Miss Daniels, I'll leave you in Mrs. Peterson's capable hands for now," he said, stepping back from the bed. "But I'd be obliged if you'd let me know when you're feeling up to visitors. As sheriff, I like to know who's passing through my town." The implied question hung in the air between them. Olivia nodded slightly, acknowledging his subtle request for information. "I won't be passing through," she said quietly. "I'm staying." Surprise flickered across Wade's face before he schooled his expression. "Then I reckon we'll be seeing more of each other," he replied. "Marysville's not a big place, Mrs. Peterson returned with a tray bearing a steaming bowl and a pitcher of water. "That's quite enough questioning for tonight, Sheriff," she chided gently. "This poor girl needs rest more than anything." Wade touched the brim of his hat. "Yes, madam." "I'll call again tomorrow, Miss Daniels, if that's agreeable." Olivia managed a weak nod, already feeling the pull of exhaustion. The last thing she saw before her eyes closed was Wade's tall figure framed in the doorway, his expression thoughtful as he departed. When she awoke, pale morning light filtered through lace curtains. For a disoriented moment, Olivia couldn't place her surroundings. The soft bed and clean sheets were a far cry from the hard ground she'd slept on for days. Memory returned in fragments: the saloon, collapsing in the street, the sheriff's strong arms carrying her. Heat rose to her cheeks at the recollection. She'd come to Marysville to disappear, not to draw attention, and yet she'd managed to do exactly the opposite within hours of arrival. A soft knock at the door preceded Mrs. Peterson's entrance. The landlady carried a breakfast tray and wore a warm smile. "Good morning, dear. I thought you might be waking about now. How are you feeling?" "Better, thank you," Olivia replied, surprised to find it was true. Her head was clearer, and though weakness still pervaded her limbs, the desperate exhaustion had receded. "I've brought you some eggs and toast, and there's coffee too," Mrs. Peterson said, placing the tray across Olivia's lap. "You eat every bite now, you need your strength." The food smelled wonderful, and Olivia realized she was ravenous. "This is very kind of you, Mrs. Peterson. I'll be able to pay for the room and board once no need to worry about that just yet," the older woman interrupted gently. "Sheriff McCullough settled your account for the week." Olivia's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "He what? Came by early this morning to check on you," Mrs. Peterson explained, moving to open the curtains wider. "Said to tell you he'd stop by this afternoon if you're feeling up to it." Olivia's appetite diminished slightly at this news. The last thing she needed was charity, especially from the local lawman. She had enough to pay her own way, even if her funds were limited. "That wasn't necessary," she said stiffly. "I'll reimburse him when he comes." Mrs. Peterson turned from the window, her kind face showing a hint of reproach. "The sheriff was just being neighborly, Miss Daniels. That's how we do things in Marysville." Olivia forced herself to take another bite of eggs. "Of course," she conceded. "I'm not accustomed to neighborliness." Something in her tone must have softened Mrs. Peterson's expression. "Well, you'll find plenty of it here, whether you're looking for it or not," she said with a smile. "Now, eat up, and if you're feeling strong enough later, I've drawn a bath for you in the washroom." The prospect of a real bath was enough to improve Olivia's mood considerably. She finished her breakfast while Mrs. Peterson bustled about the room, opening windows to let in the fresh Montana air. "I heard you tell the sheriff you're planning to stay in Marysville," the landlady remarked as she straightened the curtains. "Any particular reason you chose our little town?" Olivia tensed. "I've heard it's growing. I thought there might be opportunities." "Oh, indeed there are," Mrs. Peterson nodded enthusiastically. "With the Northern Pacific Railroad coming through, we've seen quite the influx of new businesses. What kind of work were you looking for, dear?" "I can teach," Olivia replied, relieved to turn the conversation toward practical matters. "Or keep books. I'm good with figures." "Is that so?" Mrs. Peterson looked pleased. "Well, as it happens, Mr. Wilson at the Mercantile was just saying he needs someone with a head for numbers. His eyesight isn't what it used to be, poor man. And Miss Abernathy at the schoolhouse is expecting her first child. She'll need someone to take over her classes come winter." Hope fluttered in Olivia's chest, the first she'd felt in months. "I'd be very interested in speaking with them both," she said. "I'll arrange it as soon as you're stronger," Mrs. Peterson promised, taking the empty breakfast tray. "For now, rest is what you need most. Your bath will be ready whenever you are." Left alone, Olivia swung her legs over the side of the bed and tested her strength. Her muscles protested, but she managed to stand without the dizziness of the previous day. Her saddlebags had been placed on a chair in the corner, and she made her way to them, checking that everything was still in place: her small store of money, a few personal items, and the Derringer she kept separate from her Remington. Satisfied that nothing had been disturbed, she withdrew her only change of clothes, a simple blue dress, worn but clean. The prospect of shedding her travel-stained riding clothes was almost as appealing as the bath itself. An hour later, scrubbed clean and dressed in the blue dress, with her damp hair braided neatly down her back, Olivia felt more human than she had in weeks. She stood at the window of her room, gazing out at Marysville's Main Street. The town was bigger than she'd expected, with several substantial buildings alongside the wooden structures typical of Western settlements. People moved purposefully along the boardwalks, women with shopping baskets, men in business suits mingling with laborers and cowboys. From her vantage point, she could see the sheriff's office across the street, a solid brick building with a sign proclaiming it as both the jail and law enforcement headquarters. As she watched, the door opened and Wade McCullough emerged, pausing on the step to exchange words with a passing townsman. Even from a distance, the sheriff cut an impressive figure. Tall and broad-shouldered, he moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his authority. The morning sun glinted off his badge and the sandy brown hair visible beneath his hat. As if sensing her scrutiny, he suddenly looked up, his gaze finding her window with unerring accuracy. Olivia stepped back quickly, but not before their eyes met. The connection, brief as it was, sent an unexpected jolt through her system. She turned away from the window, unsettled by her reaction. Sheriff McCullough was nothing to her, just a temporary complication she'd need to manage before fading into the background of Marysville life. The last thing she wanted was his attention, professional or otherwise. "You're being ridiculous," she muttered to herself, crossing to the small mirror above the washstand. The face that looked back at her was still too thin, the eyes too shadowed, but at least she appeared presentable now. Respectable even, it was a start. A knock at the front door of the boarding house reached her ears, followed by the murmur of voices, one male, one Mrs. Peterson's. Olivia's spine stiffened. She'd known the sheriff would call as promised, but she hadn't expected him so soon. Footsteps approached her door, and Mrs. Peterson's voice called out, "Miss Daniels, Sheriff McCullough is here to see you. Are you receiving visitors?" Olivia smoothed her dress and took a steadying breath. "Yes, Mrs. Peterson, please show him in." The door opened to admit Wade, who had removed his hat and held it in his hands. He'd also left his gun belt behind. She noted a considerate gesture meant to put her at ease. "Miss Daniels," he nodded, his gaze taking in her improved appearance. "You're looking considerably better today." "Yes, thanks to Mrs. Peterson's care," Olivia replied, gesturing to the room's only chair. "Please sit down." Wade took the offered seat while Olivia perched on the edge of the bed, maintaining a proper distance between them. Mrs. Peterson hovered in the doorway. "I'll bring some coffee," she announced before disappearing down the hallway. Alone with the sheriff, Olivia folded her hands in her lap to keep them from fidgeting. "I understand I have you to thank for my accommodations," she said. "That was unnecessary, but I appreciate the gesture." "I'd like to repay you," Wade waved away her offer. "Consider it a welcome to Marysville. Besides, I can claim it back from the town fund. Looking after travelers in distress is part of my duties." "I wasn't in distress," Olivia insisted automatically. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Madam, with all respect, you collapsed in the middle of the street. In my book, that qualifies as distress." Before she could argue further, Mrs. Peterson returned with a tray bearing coffee and slices of what appeared to be freshly baked apple cake. She placed it on a small table between them and withdrew, closing the door partially but not completely, a nod to propriety while allowing the conversation some privacy. Wade poured coffee for both of them, handing Olivia a cup before leaning back in his chair. "So, Miss Daniels, Mrs. Peterson tells me you're planning to settle in Marysville." "That's right," Olivia confirmed, wrapping her fingers around the warm cup. "I'm hoping to find work as a teacher or bookkeeper. Both are needed here," he nodded. "Though I'm curious what brings a well-spoken lady like yourself to Montana territory. We're a bit off the beaten path." Olivia had prepared for this question. "I was teaching in Helena, but I found city life unsuitable. I wanted somewhere smaller, somewhere I could be useful." It wasn't entirely a lie. She had taught briefly in Helena before everything changed. Wade studied her over the rim of his coffee cup. His eyes, she noticed for the first time, were a deep blue, intelligent and observant. "Helena to Marysville is quite a journey for a woman alone," he remarked, "especially on horseback. I'm accustomed to managing for myself, Sheriff McCullough." "I don't doubt it," he replied, "but even the most capable people need help sometimes. You traveled light, no wagon, minimal supplies. Almost as if you left in a hurry." The subtle shift in his tone alerted Olivia that this was more than casual conversation. The sheriff was investigating her, albeit politely. "Are you questioning me officially, Sheriff?" she asked, setting her cup down with a faint clink. "Not at all," he assured her. "Just getting to know a new resident. As sheriff, I like to understand who's in my town." "Is there something specific you want to know?" Wade's expression remained neutral, but his eyes were keen. "Are you in any kind of trouble, Miss Daniels? Anyone following you that I should know about?" The question hit too close to home, and Olivia fought to keep her expression composed. "No, Sheriff. I'm simply a schoolteacher looking for a fresh start. Nothing more complicated than that." He held her gaze for a long moment before nodding slowly. Fair enough, and please call me Wade. Sheriff gets tiresome after a while. The change in subject was a relief. Only if you'll call me Olivia, she replied, reaching for her coffee again. Olivia, he repeated, as if testing the name, it suits you. A strange warmth spread through her chest at his words, and she busied herself with a sip of coffee to hide her confusion. It had been a long time since she'd engaged in this kind of social exchange with a man, the kind that might, under different circumstances, be considered the beginnings of courtship. But those days were behind her. She had not come to Marysville for romance or even friendship. She had come to disappear, to build a quiet life far from the shadows of her past. "Tell me about Marysville," she said, steering the conversation to safer ground. "How long have you been sheriff here?" "Going on 5 years now," Wade replied, accepting the change of subject. "Came here after the war. The town was hardly more than a trading post back then. But with the railroad coming through and the new mining operations up in the hills, we've grown considerably." "And before the war?" Olivia asked, genuinely curious despite herself. A flicker of something regret perhaps crossed Wade's face. Studied law back east, had notions of becoming a proper attorney, maybe even a judge someday. "What changed? 4 years of watching men die changes a person's perspective," he said quietly. "When it was over, I couldn't stomach the idea of sitting in a stuffy office arguing over property lines and contract disputes. Needed open sky and work that felt immediate." Olivia nodded, understanding better than he knew. "So you became a lawman instead of an attorney." "Seems I still had some notions about justice," Wade admitted with a self-deprecating smile. "Though out here, it's a simpler kind, most days anyway." There was a depth to him that surprised her, an intelligence and thoughtfulness she hadn't expected in a frontier sheriff. It made him more dangerous in a way, harder to dismiss. "And what about you?" he asked. "What led you to teaching?" "My father was a professor," she replied, the memory bringing both fondness and pain. "He believed education was the greatest gift one could give or receive. When he died, continuing his work seemed the natural choice. He sounds like a wise man. He'd be proud to see his daughter carrying on the tradition." Olivia glanced away. "Perhaps." Wade seemed to sense he'd touched on a sensitive subject and didn't press further. Instead, he placed his empty cup on the tray and rose to his feet. "I should let you rest," he said. "But if you're feeling up to it tomorrow, I'd be happy to introduce you to some folks in town who might have work available." The offer was tempting. Having the sheriff's endorsement would smooth her path considerably. But it would also link her publicly with Wade McCullough, creating exactly the kind of attention she hoped to avoid. Before she could respond, he added, "No obligation, of course, just a neighborly offer." Put that way, refusal seemed ungracious. "That's very kind," she said carefully. "Perhaps in the afternoon I should be sufficiently recovered by then." "I'll stop by around 2, Wade agreed, collecting his hat from the chair. At the doorway he paused. "One last thing, Miss Daniels, Olivia. Whatever brought you to Marysville, you're welcome here. This town's been a fresh start for plenty of folks, myself included." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. "Thank you," she managed, unable to meet his gaze. With a nod, he departed, leaving Olivia to contemplate the unexpected complications of Sheriff Wade McCullough. The next afternoon found Olivia walking beside Wade along Marysville's Main Street. She wore her blue dress, her only option, until she could purchase more suitable clothing with her dark hair neatly pinned beneath a modest bonnet borrowed from Mrs. Peterson. Beside her, Wade had donned a clean shirt beneath his vest, though he still wore his badge and sidearm, the necessities of his position. "Wilson's Mercantile is our first stop," Wade explained, guiding her past the gunsmith shop and the town's small bank. "Archibald Wilson's owned it for 20 years, and he's as fair a businessman as you'll find." "Does he really need help with his accounts?" Olivia asked, conscious of the curious glances they were attracting from passers-by. Walking with the sheriff made her conspicuous in a way she hadn't anticipated. "He does," Wade confirmed. "His eyesight's failing and his hands shake too much for fine writing these days. His son manages the store itself, but neither of them has much head for figures." The Mercantile occupied a large corner building, its windows displaying everything from farm implements to ladies' ready-made garments. A bell jangled as Wade held the door for Olivia, admitting them to a space filled with the mingled scents of coffee, leather, and spices. An elderly man with spectacles perched on his nose looked up from behind the counter. "Sheriff McCullough, what brings you in today, Mr. Wilson? I'd like you to meet Miss Olivia Daniels," Wade said, ushering Olivia forward. "She's new to Marysville and has experience with bookkeeping." Archibald Wilson's weathered face brightened with interest. "Is that so? Well now, that is timely. These ledgers have been the bane of my existence since my eyes started going." He extended a hand to Olivia. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Daniels." "The pleasure is mine, Mr. Wilson," Olivia replied, taking his hand. "I understand you might need assistance with your accounts." "Need is putting it mildly," Wilson chuckled, leading them to a small office at the back of the store. He indicated a shelf of leather-bound ledgers and a cluttered desk. "It's all gotten away from me, I'm afraid. I can't make sense of my own writing anymore." Olivia surveyed the disarray with a professional eye. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to the most recent ledger. "Please," Wilson nodded eagerly. She opened the book, scanning the entries with practiced efficiency. The system was fairly standard, if somewhat disorganized. Several entries showed signs of frustrated corrections, the ink blotted where a shaking hand had pressed too hard. "I believe I could help bring these into order," she said after a moment. "When would you want me to start?" Wilson exchanged a glance with Wade, who remained near the door, observing silently. "How about a trial period, 3 days a week to start, see if it suits us both?" "That seems fair," Olivia agreed. "And the compensation?" They negotiated terms quickly, with Wade occasionally offering a comment that invariably favored Olivia's position. By the time they left the Mercantile, she had secured a position that would provide enough income for modest living expenses, starting the following Monday. "That went well," Wade remarked as they continued down the street. "Wilson's a good man to work for, fair and honest." "Thanks to your introduction," Olivia acknowledged. "I'm in your debt again." "Not at all. The arrangement benefits you both." Wade tipped his hat to a passing lady before adding, "Now, what about teaching? Still interested in that possibility?" "Very much so," Olivia confirmed. The bookkeeping position would provide immediate income, but teaching was her true vocation. "Then we should speak with Miss Abernathy at the schoolhouse," Wade suggested. "She's been looking for someone to train as her replacement before her confinement begins." The schoolhouse stood at the end of a side street, a tidy white building with a bell tower and a small fenced yard. Classes had ended for the day, but Wade assured her that the teacher often worked late, preparing lessons for the following day. He proved correct. Ruth Abernathy, a petite woman with kind eyes and an obviously advancing pregnancy, was arranging primers on students' desks when they entered. "Sheriff McCullough," she greeted him warmly before turning curious eyes to Olivia. "And who might this be?" "Miss Olivia Daniels, recently of Helena," Wade introduced her. "She has experience teaching and is looking to settle in Marysville." Miss Abernathy's face lit up. "Oh, that is wonderful news. I've been praying for a qualified replacement." She gestured to her rounded belly. "As you can see, I won't be able to continue much longer." "How many students do you have?" Olivia inquired, looking around the neat classroom with its rows of desks and slate boards. 27 at present, ranging from 6 to 16, Miss Abernathy replied. "It's a challenge with the different ages, but they're good children for the most part." They discussed the position at length, the curriculum, the school board's expectations, and the practical matters of taking over mid-term. By the time they concluded, Olivia had agreed to observe classes for the next 2 weeks, with an eye toward assuming full responsibilities by the month's end. "This is an answer to prayer," Miss Abernathy said earnestly as they prepared to leave. "I was so worried about abandoning the children without a proper teacher." "I'm happy to help," Olivia assured her, finding herself genuinely looking forward to being in a classroom again. Outside, the afternoon was waning, golden light slanting between buildings as they made their way back toward the boarding house. "You've had a productive day," Wade observed. Secured 2 positions in the span of a few hours. Thanks to your assistance, Olivia said. The debt of gratitude was becoming uncomfortable, another tie to this man she'd hoped to avoid. It was no hardship, Wade replied. In fact, it's been a pleasure introducing you around town. He hesitated before adding, I was wondering if you might join me for supper at the hotel dining room this evening to celebrate your successful start in Marysville. The invitation caught Olivia off guard. A private meal with the sheriff would be noticed, remarked upon. It would establish a connection in the town's gossip circles that would be difficult to sever. I don't think that would be wise, she said carefully. Wade's expression remained neutral, though something flickered in his eyes. May I ask why not? I've only just arrived, Olivia explained, choosing her words with care. I don't want to give the wrong impression. People talk, especially in small towns. And what impression would that be? Wade pressed gently. Olivia stopped walking, turning to face him directly. Sheriff McCullough, Wade, he corrected. Wade, she conceded, you've been very kind and I'm grateful, but I came to Marysville to build a quiet, independent life. Not to. She trailed off, unsure how to complete the thought without being impolite, not to be courted by the local sheriff. He finished for her, a hint of amusement in his voice. Heat rose to Olivia's cheeks. I didn't mean to presume. You didn't presume incorrectly, Wade interrupted, his tone softening. I find you interesting, Olivia Daniels, and yes, I'd like to know you better. But if you prefer to keep our association strictly professional, I'll respect that. The directness of his statement was both refreshing and alarming. Olivia hadn't expected him to acknowledge his interest so openly. It's not that I don't. She began, then shook her head. It's complicated. Wade studied her face, seeming to read more in her expression than she intended to reveal. Most worthwhile things are, he said finally. My invitation stands, but there's no pressure to accept. I'm a patient man. They had reached the boarding house gate, and Olivia was grateful for the natural conclusion to their conversation. Thank you for your understanding, she said, relief evident in her voice, and for everything today. Wade touched the brim of his hat in a courteous gesture. My pleasure, Miss Daniels. I'll check in on you tomorrow if that's agreeable. Despite her resolve to maintain distance, Olivia found herself nodding. That would be fine. As she watched him stride back toward the main street, she felt a confusing mixture of emotions. Wade McCullough was dangerously appealing, intelligent, considerate, and undeniably attractive. In another life, she might have welcomed his interest, might have allowed herself to explore the connection she already felt forming between them, but that was impossible now. Her heart lay in pieces, shattered beyond repair by betrayal and loss, and her past, the very reason she'd fled to this remote town, made any attachment too risky. For both their sakes, she needed to keep Wade McCullough at arm's length. Turning away with renewed determination, Olivia entered the boarding house, hoping that immersing herself in work would prove sufficient distraction from the sheriff's blue eyes and gentle persistence. Over the next 2 weeks, Olivia established a routine. Mornings were spent at Wilson's Mercantile, bringing order to the chaotic accounts. Afternoons found her at the schoolhouse, observing Miss Abernathy's teaching methods and becoming acquainted with the students who would soon be in her care. She saw Wade daily. Marysville was too small for their paths not to cross, but she maintained a careful cordiality, neither encouraging nor completely rebuffing his attention. For his part, the sheriff respected her unspoken boundaries, limiting their interactions to brief conversations about her adjustment to town life. Yet despite her efforts to remain detached, Olivia found herself watching for him, her pulse quickening when he appeared on his rounds. She learned his habits, how he visited every business on Main Street each morning, how he tipped his hat to every lady regardless of age or station, how he always had time to answer a child's curious questions about his badge or his gun. The townspeople clearly respected him, not merely for his position, but for the man he was. Gradually, through conversations with Mrs. Peterson and others, Olivia pieced together more of Wade McCullough's story. He had indeed studied law before the war, showing such promise that his professors had marked him for a judgeship someday. But 4 years of brutal conflict had changed him, as it had changed so many men. After Appomattox, he drifted west, working as a deputy in several towns before settling in Marysville just as it began to grow. Under his steady guidance, the town had remained largely peaceful despite the influx of railroad workers and fortune seekers drawn to the nearby mines. "He's turned down offers to run for territorial office," Mrs. Peterson confided over tea one evening. "Says he prefers dealing with people face to face, not from behind some desk in Helena, he seems. Content here," Olivia observed, trying to sound merely conversational, Mrs. Peterson gave her a knowing look. "He is, though some think he's lonely. Never married, you know, though not for lack of interest from the local ladies." Olivia busied herself with her teacup, avoiding the landlady's too perceptive gaze. "I'm sure the right woman will come along eventually." "Some might say she already has," Mrs. Peterson replied with a meaningful smile. Olivia changed the subject quickly, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Yet the thought lingered, why had a man like Wade remained unmarried? He was handsome, educated, established in his career. Any woman would consider him an excellent prospect, any woman but her. On the Friday marking her second week in Marysville, Olivia was sorting invoices at the mercantile when the bell above the door jangled. She glanced up, expecting Mr. Wilson's son returning from his deliveries, and instead found Wade standing just inside the entrance. Something in his expression alerted her immediately attention she hadn't seen before. "Sheriff," she greeted him, setting aside her work. "Is everything all right?" Wade approached the counter, removing his hat. "Is there somewhere we could speak privately, Olivia?" The use of her given name and his serious tone sent a chill through her. "Mr. Wilson is in the storeroom. We can use the office." She led him to the small room where she did her bookkeeping and closed the door behind them. "What is it? Has something happened?" Wade hesitated, compassion evident in his eyes. "A telegram came in from Helena this morning, for me, but concerning you." Olivia's fingers tightened on the back of the chair beside her. "What did it say?" "It was from the U.S. Marshal's office," Wade said carefully. "They're looking for a witness to testify against Jack Blackwood and his gang. A woman who escaped during their last robbery, a stage holdup outside Helena 3 months ago." The blood drained from Olivia's face. "I see. They described this witness in some detail," Wade continued, watching her closely. "Dark hair, early 20s, educated. A schoolteacher who disappeared from Helena shortly after giving her initial statement." Olivia sank into the chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her. "And you think this witness is me?" It wasn't a question, but Wade answered anyway. "I know it's you, Olivia." The details matched too precisely to be coincidence. She closed her eyes briefly, fighting the wave of panic threatening to overwhelm her. "Are you here to arrest me?" "Arrest you?" Wade sounded genuinely surprised. "Why would I arrest you? You're a witness, not a criminal." "Then what?" Olivia asked, opening her eyes to meet his gaze. "Will you send me back to Helena?" Wade pulled the other chair closer and sat, bringing himself to her eye level. "I'm not going to force you to do anything, but I need to understand what happened, why you ran." "The marshal's telegram mentioned only that you're a key witness who disappeared before the trial." Olivia studied his face, searching for any sign of deception or judgment. Finding none, she made a decision. If anyone deserved the truth, it was Wade McCullough. "I was traveling on the stage from Butte to Helena," she began, her voice quiet but steady. "It was attacked by Blackwood's gang just outside the city. They killed the driver and the guard immediately. There were 3 other passengers, a young couple and an elderly gentleman." The memories flooded back with painful clarity, the sounds of gunfire, the screams, the sickening lurch as the stage careened to a halt. "Blackwood himself ordered us out of the coach. They took our valuables then." She swallowed hard. "Then one of his men recognized me." Wade's expression darkened. "You knew him?" "No, he knew of me," Olivia clarified. My fiancé was a banker in Helena. Daniel Rogers. This man, one of Blackwood's gang, had apparently cased the bank for a robbery. He told Blackwood that I was engaged to Rogers, that they could use me to get inside the vault after hours." Understanding dawned in Wade's eyes. So they took you hostage. Olivia nodded, her hands twisting in her lap. They shot the other passengers, left them there by the roadside. I was forced onto a horse, blindfolded. We rode for hours before reaching their camp in the hills. How long did they hold you? Wade asked gently. 3 days, Olivia replied, her voice hollow. They sent one of the gang to Helena with a message for Daniel, bring the bank's cash or they'd kill me. But something went wrong. There was an argument in camp, shots fired. In the confusion, I managed to slip away. I had removed my blindfold enough to see the path back to the main road. That was incredibly brave, Wade said quietly. A bitter smile touched Olivia's lips. Or incredibly lucky, I stumbled into a U.S. Marshals patrol the next morning. They took me back to Helena, where I gave a statement identifying the men I'd seen. Her voice faltered. Including the one who'd recognized me. And your fiancé, was he there when you returned? The question struck at the heart of her pain, and Olivia's composure wavered. Daniel was there, she confirmed, but not as I expected. Wade waited, giving her space to continue at her own pace. The marshal took me to Daniel's house, thinking I'd want to be with family after my ordeal. We found him with another woman, Margaret Foster, the banker's daughter. They were. Olivia closed her eyes against the memory. They were celebrating their engagement. My God, Wade breathed, shock and anger mingling in his expression. 3 days, Olivia said, a trace of the old hurt bleeding into her voice. I was missing for 3 days, presumed dead or worse, and he had already replaced me. Had already proposed to the woman whose father owned the bank where he worked. She looked down at her hands, pale against the dark fabric of her dress. When he saw me, he claimed he thought I was dead. That grief had driven him to seek comfort. But the marshal's men found correspondence between them that predated my abduction by months. He'd been courting you both, Wade concluded grimly. Apparently, Miss Foster was the more advantageous match, Olivia said, unable to keep the bitterness from her tone. I was merely a schoolteacher with no family connections, no fortune. When I disappeared, it simplified matters for him. Wade's jaw tightened, and for a moment, raw anger flashed in his eyes. The man deserves to be horsewhipped. Despite everything, Olivia found herself touched by his indignation on her behalf. I thought so too at the time, but now, she shook her head, now I'm almost grateful. Better to discover his true character before marriage than after. That's a generous perspective, Wade remarked. Not generous, necessary. Olivia straightened her shoulders. I stayed in Helena long enough to testify at the preliminary hearing, identified the gang members, including the one who recognized me, a man named Peterson, no relation to our landlady. And Blackwood himself. He wasn't captured, Olivia explained. Only 3 of his men. The marshal hoped my testimony would help convict them and lead to Blackwood eventually. So why did you leave before the trial? Wade asked, returning to the central question. Olivia hesitated, the fear that had driven her from Helena still raw. 2 weeks after I gave my initial testimony, someone broke into my rooms. They left a note, just a piece of paper with a crude drawing of a coffin and the words "witnesses don't live long." Wade's expression hardened. Did you report this to the marshal? Of course. He offered protection, but Olivia gestured helplessly. Helena had become unbearable anyway. Everyone knew about Daniel's betrayal. People pitied me, or worse, gossiped that I must have somehow driven him away. The thought of staying there, living under guard while waiting for a trial that might take months. She shook her head. I couldn't do it. So you ran, Wade concluded, no judgment in his tone. I ran, Olivia confirmed. Left a letter for the marshal explaining my reasons, withdrew my savings, and headed east into the territory. I chose Marysville because it was small enough to disappear in, but growing enough that a new face wouldn't cause too much comment. Wade was silent for a long moment, absorbing everything she'd told him. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentle. Thank you for trusting me with this, Olivia. You didn't leave me much choice, she pointed out, though without rancor. No, I suppose I didn't. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. The marshal wants to know if you're here, if you're safe. He mentioned in the telegram that the trial has been scheduled 3 weeks from now in Helena. Fear clutched at Olivia's heart. Are you going to tell him where I am? That depends on you, Wade replied. If you're adamant about not testifying, I won't force the issue, but I hope you'll reconsider. Why? Olivia challenged, frustration rising. So I can put myself in danger again, so Blackwood or his remaining men can find me. So those men can face justice for what they did, Wade countered. Not just to you, but to the others they killed. That young couple, the elderly gentleman, don't they deserve justice too? The question struck home, and Olivia looked away, unable to meet his steady gaze. You're afraid, Wade acknowledged. Anyone would be after what you've been through. But running forever isn't the answer, Olivia. It's no kind of life. And what kind of life will I have if Blackwood's men find me? She asked quietly. Or if I have to return to Helena and face Daniel again, face the gossip and the pity? Wade reached across the space between them, hesitating before gently taking her hand. It was the first time he had touched her since carrying her to the boarding house that first night. You won't face any of it alone, he said, his voice low and fierce with conviction. If you decide to testify, I'll accompany you to Helena. I'll stay by your side through the trial. And when it's over, I'll bring you safely back to Marysville, where you have a home now and work that matters and people who care about you. The warmth of his hand around hers, the sincerity in his eyes, it was almost too much. Olivia withdrew her fingers, needing physical distance to think clearly. I can't. She began, then faltered. You don't need to decide this minute, Wade assured her. Think about it, pray about it if that's your way. I need to send some response to the marshal, but I can buy you a day or two. Olivia nodded, grateful for even this small reprieve. Thank you. Wade rose, replacing his hat. Whatever you decide, Olivia, know that your place here is secure. No one in Marysville will think less of you for what happened in Helena. As he turned to leave, Olivia found her voice again. Wade. He paused, looking back at her. The real reason I refused your dinner invitation, she said, compelled toward honesty now that so much truth had been spoken. It wasn't just about appearances or town gossip. I know, he said softly, after Daniel, after everything. She struggled to articulate the complexity of her feelings. I'm not the woman I was before, that Olivia believed in love and happy endings. She's gone. Wade studied her face, his expression thoughtful. I don't believe that. Wounded, yes. Changed, certainly, but not gone, not destroyed. You can't know that, Olivia insisted. Can't I? A sad smile touched his lips. I've seen men shattered by war put themselves back together, piece by jagged piece. I've done it myself. The heart heals, Olivia, given time, given care. Before she could respond, he was gone, the door closing quietly behind him. Olivia remained in the office for a long time afterward, her mind a tumult of conflicting thoughts and emotions. The past she'd fled had found her, as she'd always feared it would. Now she faced an impossible choice: return to Helena and the dangers waiting there, or continue running, perhaps forever. And then there was Wade McCullough, offering support without demanding anything in return. His gentle strength, his unwavering integrity, they called to something deep within her, something she'd thought dead and buried alongside her broken engagement. I'm too broken to love again, she whispered to the empty room, testing the words as if their truth could protect her. But even as she spoke them, doubt crept in. Perhaps Wade was right. Perhaps the heart, like the body, could heal from even the most grievous wounds. By evening, Olivia had reached a decision. She would return to Helena for the trial, not for herself, but for those who could no longer seek justice, the young couple and elderly gentleman whose names she didn't even know. Their faces haunted her dreams still, their lives cut short while she had survived. She owed them this much at least. She found Wade at his office, working late by the light of an oil lamp. When she entered, he looked up from his paperwork, surprise and then understanding crossing his features. You'll testify, he said, a statement rather than a question. Olivia nodded, her resolve firm despite the fear still coiled in her stomach. Yes, but I have conditions. Name them, Wade replied, setting aside his pen. I want to continue teaching here when it's over. I want my life in Marysville to remain as it is now, she said. And I want your word that you'll be with me throughout the trial as you promised. You have it, he assured her without hesitation. I'll send a telegram to the marshal tomorrow morning confirming your willingness to testify. We'll need to leave for Helena in about 2 weeks. So soon. Olivia's composure wavered slightly. The sooner we go, the sooner it will be finished, Wade pointed out gently. And the sooner you can return to your students, she nodded, acknowledging the logic. Will you tell people here why we're going, about my situation? Only what's necessary, Wade promised. That you're a witness in an important case, nothing more. Your privacy will be respected. Relief softened Olivia's features. Thank you. There's one more thing, Wade said, rising from his desk to stand before her. Something I need to make clear before we undertake this journey together. Olivia tensed, uncertain what was coming. What is it? My support, my protection comes with no strings attached, he said firmly. I'm accompanying you as Marysville's sheriff, as your friend if you'll allow it, but not with any expectations beyond that. The implication was clear, and Olivia felt a curious mixture of disappointment and relief. I understand. Good, Wade's expression softened. That said, I won't pretend my feelings for you are merely professional or friendly, but I respect your position and I won't press the matter further. Olivia found herself unable to look away from his steady gaze. What if? She began, then hesitated. What if? He prompted gently. What if I'm always broken? She asked, voicing her deepest fear. What if I can never be the kind of woman who could love someone again? Wade's smile was sad but tender. Then I'll love enough for both of us, he said simply. The words struck Olivia like a physical blow. No man had ever spoken to her with such raw honesty, such selfless devotion. Not even Daniel, whose pretty phrases had concealed a calculating heart. You can't mean that, she whispered. I do, Wade affirmed. But don't worry, I don't expect you to respond or reciprocate. I just wanted you to know where I stand before we undertake this journey together. Overwhelmed, Olivia could only nod. I should go, she managed finally. There's much to prepare before we leave. Of course, Wade agreed, stepping back to give her space. We'll speak more tomorrow about the arrangements. As Olivia walked back to the boarding house through Marysville's quiet streets, her mind replayed Wade's words over and over. Then I'll love enough for both of us. Such a simple declaration, yet it contained multitudes' acceptance of her brokenness, promise of patience, absence of demand. For the first time since fleeing Helena, Olivia allowed herself to consider a future beyond mere survival. A future that might, someday, include the capacity to love again. The journey to Helena took 3 days by stage and rail, a reverse of the path Olivia had taken to Marysville 2 months earlier. This time, however, she traveled not alone but with Wade at her side, his steady presence a bulwark against her growing anxiety as familiar landmarks appeared. They arrived in the territorial capital late in the afternoon, checking into a respectable hotel near the courthouse. The marshal had arranged adjoining rooms with a private sitting area where Olivia could receive visitors without venturing into the public spaces of the city. We're expected at the marshal's office tomorrow morning, Wade informed her as they took a simple supper in that sitting room. He'll want to review your testimony, prepare you for what to expect in court. Olivia nodded, pushing food around her plate without appetite. Will Daniel be there? At the trial, I mean. Wade set down his fork, studying her face. Would it matter if he was? I don't know, she admitted. Part of me wants to see him to show him that I survived, that I'm stronger now, but another part doesn't want to give him the satisfaction of knowing he still affects you, Wade finished for her. Yes, exactly. Olivia looked up, grateful for his understanding. Is that petty of me? Not at all, Wade assured her, but for what it's worth, I doubt he'll attend. Men like that cowards at heart, they avoid confrontation when possible. The following morning brought confirmation of Wade's prediction. Marshal James Bennett, a gruff but kind-eyed man in his 50s, welcomed them to his office with coffee and a direct update on the case. We've got 3 of Blackwood's men in custody, he explained. Including Peterson, the one who recognized you, Miss Daniels. The trial should be straightforward. Your testimony linking them to the stage robbery and murders is our strongest evidence. And Blackwood himself. Wade asked, seated beside Olivia in the marshal's cluttered office. Bennett's expression darkened. Still at large, I'm afraid, but his gang's been scattered. These three are the last of his regular crew as far as we know. What about the threats against Miss Daniels? Wade pressed, his concern evident. We investigated thoroughly, Bennett assured them. Best we can determine, it was Peterson's brother who left that note, trying to scare off our witness. He's been arrested too on separate charges. Olivia absorbed this information with cautious relief. So you believe the danger has passed? Nothing's certain in this line of work, Bennett said honestly. But yes, I believe you're safe now, especially with Sheriff McCullough watching over you. They spent the next 2 hours reviewing Olivia's testimony, ensuring she recalled the details clearly without embellishment or omission. By noon, Bennett pronounced her well prepared and suggested they rest until the trial began the following morning. As they left the marshal's office, Wade placed a protective hand at the small of Olivia's back, guiding her through Helena's busy streets. It was a simple gesture, yet Olivia found herself drawing strength from it, from his unobtrusive but constant vigilance. "Is there anywhere you'd like to go while we're here?" he asked as they approached the hotel. "Any friends you'd like to visit?" Olivia considered the question. "There is one place," she said finally. "The school where I taught, I left without saying goodbye to my students or colleagues. I'd like to see it once more if possible." "Of course," Wade agreed readily. "We can go this afternoon if you feel up to it." The Helena Academy for Girls stood on a quiet street lined with cottonwood trees, their leaves rustling in the autumn breeze. Classes were in session when Olivia and Wade arrived, but the headmistress, Mrs. Alina Graham, received them in her office with evident delight. "Miss Daniels, what a wonderful surprise," she exclaimed, clasping Olivia's hands warmly. "We've been so worried about you since your sudden departure." "I'm sorry for leaving as I did," Olivia replied, genuinely regretful for the concern she'd caused. "Circumstances made it necessary." Mrs. Graham's expression sobered. "Yes, I heard about that dreadful business with Mr. Rogers, most shocking behavior on his part." She turned a curious eye toward Wade. "And who might this gentleman be?" Olivia performed the introductions, explaining Wade's role as Marysville's sheriff without elaborating on their exact relationship. "I see," Mrs. Graham nodded, her shrewd gaze moving between them. "Well, Sheriff, you've chosen an excellent lady to escort. Miss Daniels was one of our finest teachers." "I have no doubt of that," Wade replied with a warm smile toward Olivia. "Are you in Helena for long?" the headmistress inquired. "Just a few days," Olivia answered carefully. "I'm testifying in a trial, then returning to Marysville. I've taken a teaching position there." "Ah, so we've lost you permanently," Mrs. Graham sighed. "Well, their gain is certainly our loss, but you must see your former students before you go. They've missed you terribly." They're in music class now in the assembly hall. The reunion with her former pupils brought tears to Olivia's eyes. The girls, ranging from 8 to 16, surrounded her with exclamations of joy and a barrage of questions about her new life. Wade stood back, watching with evident pleasure as Olivia's reserve melted away among these young admirers. "You're a natural with them," he commented as they walked back to the hotel later. "Marysville's children are fortunate to have you." "I've missed teaching," Olivia admitted. "The bookkeeping work is satisfying in its way, but it doesn't compare to seeing a child's face light up with understanding." Wade nodded, seemingly content to let her lead the conversation. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, the afternoon sun warming the air despite the advancing autumn. "I've been thinking about what the marshal said," Olivia said finally, "about the threats likely coming from Peterson's brother. What about it? If that's true, if the danger has passed." She hesitated, gathering courage. "I'm wondering if I've been hiding unnecessarily, running when I didn't need to." Wade considered her words carefully. "Perhaps," he allowed, "but you had no way of knowing that at the time. You made the best decision you could with the information you had. And it led me to Marysville," Olivia mused, "to a new start, a new purpose. To people who care about you," Wade added quietly. Olivia glanced at him, catching the warmth in his gaze before he looked away. "Yes," she agreed softly, "to people who care." The trial began the next morning, the courtroom packed with curious spectators and reporters from Helena's newspapers. Olivia sat beside the marshal, her back straight despite the knot of anxiety in her stomach. Wade occupied a seat directly behind her, his presence a source of silent support. The proceedings moved quickly. The prosecution presented evidence of the stage robbery, including testimony from the drivers of the stage that had discovered the bodies of the victims. Then it was Olivia's turn to take the stand. She spoke clearly, her voice steady as she recounted the horrific events of that day. She described each of the accused men in detail, identifying them without hesitation when asked. When questioned about her captivity, she maintained her composure, though Wade noticed her hands trembling slightly as they clasped the witness rail. The defense attorney's cross-examination was aggressive but ultimately ineffective. Olivia's testimony remained consistent, her recall precise. By noon, she was excused from the stand, her ordeal as a witness complete. "You did admirably," Wade told her as they left the courthouse for a brief recess. "The jury was clearly moved by your account." Olivia nodded, exhaustion evident in the slump of her shoulders. "I hope it's enough. I hope those men never harm anyone else. After your testimony, I'd be surprised if they see the outside of a prison again," Wade assured her. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. The judge sentenced the 3 men to hang, their executions scheduled for the following month. As the prisoners were led from the courtroom, one of them, Peterson, turned to glare at Olivia with naked hatred. Wade moved instantly to her side, his hand covering hers where it rested on the rail separating spectators from the court floor. "It's over," he murmured. "They can't hurt you now." Olivia nodded, her eyes fixed on the closing door through which the condemned men had passed. "It's over," she repeated, as if testing the truth of the words. Outside the courthouse, Marshal Bennett shook their hands warmly. "That's justice done thanks to your courage, Miss Daniels," he said. "The territory owes you a debt of gratitude." "What about Blackwood?" Wade asked. "Any leads on his whereabouts?" "Nothing concrete," Bennett admitted. "But with his gang dismantled, he's likely moved on to other territories. Wyoming, maybe, or Dakota." "And you're certain Miss Daniels is no longer in danger?" Wade pressed. "As certain as I can be in this line of work," the marshal replied honestly, "but I'd keep a weather eye out just the same, at least until Blackwood's captured or confirmed dead." Olivia absorbed this advice with a composure that impressed both men. "Then we should return to Marysville as planned," she said. "I have students waiting for me." They departed Helena the next morning, the city just stirring to life as their stage rolled out. Olivia gazed back at the receding buildings, a curious lightness in her chest. She had faced her fears, fulfilled her duty to those who had died, and emerged intact. Not unscathed, never that but whole in a way she hadn't felt since the day the stage was attacked. "Having second thoughts about leaving?" Wade asked, noticing her backward glance. "No," Olivia replied with certainty. "Just closing a chapter, I suppose, saying goodbye to who I was here." Wade nodded, understanding in his eyes. "And looking forward to who you'll be in Marysville?" A small smile curved Olivia's lips. "Yes, I believe I am." The return journey passed more quickly than the outbound one, perhaps because anticipation replaced dread in Olivia's heart. She found herself telling Wade stories from her childhood, describing her father's academic pursuits and her mother's passion for music. In turn, he shared memories of his own youth in Pennsylvania, his law studies, and the transformative years of the war. They spoke of books they'd read, ideas they valued, dreams they'd harbored. It was the most Olivia had spoken to anyone in months, and she marveled at how easy it was to talk with Wade, how he listened without judgment, responded without pretension. "I've never met anyone quite like you, Sheriff McCullough," she remarked as their stage crossed into Montana territory on the second day. "Is that a compliment or an observation?" he asked, amusement crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Both, I think," Olivia replied thoughtfully. "You're steadier than most people, more certain of yourself but without arrogance. War has a way of burning away pretense," Wade said after a moment. You learn quickly what matters and what doesn't when men are dying around you. Olivia nodded, understanding better than most. My experience wasn't war, she said quietly, but I think I know what you mean. Being kidnapped, facing death, it clarifies things. And what did it clarify for you? Wade asked, his tone gentle. Olivia gazed out the stage window at the passing landscape, considering her answer. That appearances matter less than substance. That courage isn't the absence of fear, but action despite it. She paused before adding, that some wounds heal given time while others change us permanently. Wade was silent for a long moment. Do you still believe you're too broken to love again? He asked finally, his voice low enough that only she could hear it. The question hung between them, weighted with all that had transpired since her arrival in Marysville. Olivia turned from the window to meet his steady gaze. I don't know, she admitted, more honest than she'd been with anyone, including herself, in months. But I'm beginning to think. I might be ready to find out. The simple declaration seemed to shift something fundamental between them. Wade didn't push for more, didn't attempt to take her hand or make grand pronouncements. He simply nodded, a quiet joy lighting his eyes. That's enough for now, he said softly. They reached Marysville late in the afternoon of the third day, the familiar buildings a welcome sight after their journey. News of their return spread quickly through the small town, and by evening, visitors had begun arriving at the boarding house. Mrs. Peterson with a freshly baked pie, Mr. Wilson to inquire about the accounts, Miss Abernathy to discuss the school schedule. The whole town missed you, Wade remarked as he prepared to leave after escorting the last visitor out. They're glad to have you back safely. It seems I've found a home here, Olivia acknowledged, standing in the doorway of the boarding house. Thanks in large part to you, Wade shook his head. You've made your own place, Olivia. I just introduced you around. You did much more than that, she insisted. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You stood by me when. Her voice faltered. And I always will, Wade promised quietly, for as long as you'll allow it. In the gathering dusk, with the sounds of Marysville's evening settling around them, Olivia made a decision. She stepped forward and, with deliberate gentleness, placed her hand on Wade's arm. I'd like to accept that dinner invitation now, she said, if it's still open. Wade's smile illuminated his face, transforming his usual reserved expression into something radiant. It is, he confirmed. Tomorrow evening, the hotel dining room, tomorrow evening, Olivia agreed, her own smile tentative but genuine. As Wade tipped his hat and turned to leave, Olivia called after him, Wade. He looked back, eyebrows raised in question. Thank you, she said simply, for everything. The dinner the following evening marked the beginning of a courtship conducted with careful consideration for Olivia's still healing heart. Wade never rushed her, never demanded more than she was ready to give. Their relationship unfolded gradually through shared meals and conversations, walks along Marysville's streets, and quiet evenings on the boarding house porch. Olivia found herself looking forward to these times together, the weight of her past lightening incrementally with each shared moment. She observed the way Wade interacted with her students when he visited the schoolhouse, the respect he showed to every citizen regardless of status, the quiet integrity that guided his actions as sheriff. As autumn deepened toward winter, Olivia's position in Marysville solidified. With Miss Abernathy's departure for her confinement, Olivia assumed full responsibility for the school, earning the respect of both students and parents. She continued her bookkeeping work for Mr. Wilson 2 afternoons a week and gradually expanded her social circle beyond Wade and Mrs. Peterson. You're blooming, Mrs. Peterson remarked one evening as they sat by the parlor fire, Olivia grading student papers while the landlady knitted. It does my heart good to see it. Olivia looked up, surprised by the observation. Am I so different? Night and day from the young woman who collapsed on my doorstep 3 months ago, Mrs. Peterson confirmed. You walk taller, smile easier, and you look at our sheriff with something other than fear in your eyes now. Heat rose to Olivia's cheeks. Is it that obvious? Only to those with eyes to see, the older woman replied with a knowing smile. He's a good man, Olivia, the best in these parts if you ask me. Yes, Olivia agreed softly. I believe he is. The first snow of winter fell in early December, transforming Marysville into a crystalline wonderland overnight. Olivia woke to find the world outside her window draped in white, the morning sun creating diamond sparkles across untouched drifts. Wade called for her that afternoon, arriving at the boarding house with a horse-drawn sleigh borrowed from one of the local ranchers. I thought you might enjoy seeing Marysville from a different perspective, he suggested, helping her into the sleigh and tucking a thick buffalo robe around her legs. They glided through the snow-covered streets and out into the open country beyond the town limits, the only sounds the jingling of the harness bells and the soft shush of runners over snow. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks gleaming white against the clear blue sky. "It's beautiful," Olivia breathed, her words forming small clouds in the crisp air. "It is," Wade agreed, though when she glanced at him, he was looking not at the landscape but at her. Something in his gaze, tenderness mixed with barely contained emotion, made Olivia's heart quicken. They had been courting for nearly 2 months, yet Wade had never presumed more than the occasional touch of her hand, the briefest kiss to her cheek in parting. She understood his restraint, his determination to let her set the pace of their relationship. But as they sat together in the sleigh, surrounded by the pristine beauty of Montana winter, Olivia realized that restraint was no longer necessary. "Wade," she said softly, "I think I'm ready now." He turned to her, question in his eyes. "Ready for what?" "To stop being afraid," she replied. "To trust again, too?" She hesitated before finishing. "To love again." Wade's breath caught visibly in his throat. "Olivia," he began, his voice rough with emotion, "are you certain?" "I don't want you to feel pressured, or I'm certain," she interrupted, placing her gloved hand over his where it held the reins. "You've been so patient, so understanding. You said once that you'd love enough for both of us, but the truth is, you've helped me find my own capacity to love again. You've helped me heal." Wade's free hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch gentle despite the thick gloves they both wore. "I've loved you since that first day," he confessed, "when you walked into the saloon looking like you could face down the devil himself." Olivia smiled at the memory, turning her face slightly to press a kiss to his palm. "I was terrified that day," she admitted, "exhausted and desperate and so sure I'd never feel whole again. And now," Wade asked, his eyes searching hers. "Now I feel like myself again," Olivia replied. "Not the same self. I don't think we ever go back to who we were before pain changes us, but a stronger self perhaps, a wiser one." "And that self," Wade said carefully, "could she love a simple sheriff from a small Montana town?" In answer, Olivia leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was tentative at first, then deepened as Wade's arm circled her waist, drawing her closer beneath the buffalo robe. When they finally parted, both were breathless, their faces flushed with more than just the cold. "Does that answer your question?" Olivia asked, her voice unsteady but her eyes bright with certainty. Wade's smile was radiant. "Eloquently," he replied, before kissing her again with gentle thoroughness. The sleigh remained stationary for some time afterward, its occupants lost in conversation and increasingly confident embraces, oblivious to the cold, and the passage of time until the winter sun began its early descent toward the horizon. "We should head back," Wade said reluctantly, gathering the reins. Olivia nodded, settling against his side as the sleigh turned toward Marysville. "Wade," she said after a moment, "where is this leading us, I mean?" He glanced down at her, his expression serious. "Where would you like it to lead?" "I'd like." Olivia gathered her courage. "I'd like a future with you, a home, perhaps children someday, a life together in Marysville." Wade's arm tightened around her shoulders. "I want those things too," he said, "more than I can say. But I'm willing to wait until you're completely ready." "I think," Olivia said slowly, "that sometimes we have to take that leap of faith, even if we're not completely certain we can fly. Otherwise, we remain forever grounded." Wade's laugh was warm with affection. "My scholarly Olivia, always with the perfect metaphor." "Not always," she demurred, though pleased by his appreciation, "but in this case I believe it's apt." They reached the boarding house as twilight settled over Marysville, the windows of homes and businesses glowing with lamplight against the gathering darkness. Wade helped Olivia from the sleigh, but instead of leading her immediately to the door, he held her hands in his expression suddenly solemn. "Olivia Daniels," he said, his voice low but clear in the still evening air, "I love you. I have since the moment I carried you through this very door. I'll understand if you need more time, but I'd be honored if you'd consider becoming my wife." Though she had anticipated this moment throughout their return journey, the reality of Wade's proposal still took Olivia's breath away. She looked up at him, this good, patient man who had shown her that love could be steady and true rather than false and fleeting. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, Wade McCullough, I will marry you." His smile was incandescent as he gathered her into his arms, lifting her briefly off her feet in his exuberance before setting her down to kiss her thoroughly. Olivia returned his embrace without reservation, her heart lighter than it had been in longer than she could remember. "When?" Wade asked as they finally separated, though he kept her hands in his. "How soon can I make you Mrs. McCullough?" Olivia considered the question with practical deliberation. "Spring would be lovely," she suggested. "After the school term ends, that would give us time to prepare properly." Wade nodded, though his expression suggested he'd have married her the very next day if possible. "Spring it is, though it will be the longest winter of my life waiting for you." Olivia laughed, the sound bright in the snowy evening. "You won't have to wait alone," she promised. "We'll have plenty of time together between now and then." Their engagement was announced the following Sunday at church, to the evident delight of the congregation. Mrs. Peterson was among the first to offer congratulations, her eyes suspiciously moist as she embraced Olivia. "I knew at the moment he carried you through my door," the landlady confided. "Some things are simply meant to be." The winter months passed in a flurry of preparation and quiet moments of growing intimacy. Wade purchased land on the outskirts of Marysville and began construction of a modest but comfortable home, consulting Olivia on every detail from the layout of rooms to the color of paint. Olivia, meanwhile, continued teaching while sewing items for her trousseau in the evenings. The work of her hands, embroidered linens, quilts, curtains became tangible expressions of her hope for the future, each stitch an act of faith in the life she and Wade would build together. They were married on a perfect May morning, with apple blossoms scenting the air and meadowlarks singing in the fields beyond town. The church overflowed with well-wishers not just from Marysville, but from surrounding farms and ranches, all eager to celebrate the union of their respected sheriff and beloved schoolteacher. Olivia wore a gown of ivory silk, ordered from Helena with Mrs. Peterson's assistance. Wade, resplendent in a new black suit, waited for her at the altar with an expression of such transparent joy that several of the ladies in attendance were moved to tears before the ceremony even began. "Dearly beloved," the minister intoned, his voice carrying to the furthest corners of the packed church. Olivia, standing beside Wade with their hands joined, felt a profound sense of rightness settle over her. This was where she belonged, not just in Marysville, but at this man's side, building a life founded on mutual respect, shared values, and deepening love. When the time came to speak their vows, Wade's voice rang clear and confident. "I, Wade Michael McCullough, take thee, Olivia Catherine Daniels, to be my wedded wife. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." Olivia's own voice trembled slightly with emotion but gained strength as she continued. "I, Olivia Catherine Daniels, take thee, Wade Michael McCullough, to be my wedded husband. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." The exchange of rings' simple gold bands sealed their promises. And when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Wade's kiss was both reverent and possessive, a perfect balance of respect and passion that set Olivia's heart racing. They emerged from the church to cheers and a shower of flower petals, the entire town seeming to celebrate their union. The wedding feast, held in the hotel's dining room, lasted well into the evening, with music and dancing and enough food to feed Marysville twice over. As twilight deepened into night, Wade led his bride away from the celebration and toward their new home at the edge of town. The house stood outlined against the darkening sky, every window lit with welcome. "Mrs. Peterson and some of the ladies prepared it for us," Wade explained as he lifted Olivia into his arms at the threshold. "I haven't seen it finished myself, wanted us to have that moment together." He carried her across the threshold and set her gently on her feet in the entrance hall. Olivia looked around with delight at the simple, tasteful furnishings, some new, some contributed by friends, all arranged with care to create a comfortable home. "It's perfect," she breathed, moving from room to room with growing appreciation. The parlor with its stone fireplace, the dining room with the table Wade had crafted himself, the kitchen with its gleaming cookstove and well-stocked pantry. But it was the bedroom that brought tears to her eyes, spacious and welcoming, with a large bed covered by the wedding quilt she had labored over all winter. Someone had placed a vase of fresh apple blossoms on the dresser, their sweet fragrance filling the air. "Do you like it?" Wade asked, watching her reaction anxiously. "We can change anything that doesn't suit you." Olivia turned to him, her heart so full she could barely speak. "I love it," she managed, "all of it. It's everything I could have wished for." Relief and happiness transformed Wade's expression. "Then welcome home, Mrs. McCullough," he said softly. The name, her new name, sent a thrill through Olivia. She stepped into her husband's arms, all earlier nervousness about their wedding night forgotten in the safety of his embrace. "I never thought I'd have this," she confessed against his shoulder. "After Helena, after Daniel, I thought that part of my life was over." Wade's hands stroked gently down her back, comforting and possessive at once. "You told me once that you were too broken to love again," he reminded her. "Do you remember what I said?" Olivia nodded, lifting her face to meet his gaze. "You said you'd love enough for both of us." "And I meant it," Wade assured her, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "But I don't think I need to anymore. You found your way back to love all on your own." "Not on my own," Olivia corrected him. "With you beside me, showing me what real love looks like, steady and patient and true." Wade's kiss was tender at first, then increasingly urgent as Olivia responded with newfound confidence. The fears of the past receded completely, replaced by the certainty that here, with this man, she was finally home. In the years that followed, Olivia often thought back to that desperate day when she had stumbled into Marysville, convinced her heart was irreparably shattered. How wrong she had been, how fortunate that fate, or providence, had led her to a town where a man like Wade McCullough served as sheriff. Their life together was not without challenges. The winter of their second year of marriage brought influenza to Marysville, and Olivia worked tirelessly alongside Wade to care for the afflicted. They lost several of the town's elderly residents, including dear Mr. Wilson, whose funeral saw the entire community in attendance. The following spring brought happier news. Olivia was expecting their first child. Their son, William James McCullough, was born on a stormy September night in 1879, his lusty cries announcing his arrival to a relieved father who had paced the porch throughout his wife's long labor. "He has your eyes," Olivia told Wade as he held their son for the first time, wonder evident in his expression. "And your determined chin," Wade replied, gently touching the baby's face with a reverent finger. Olivia continued teaching until a month before William's birth, then took a year's leave to care for their child. When she returned to the schoolhouse, it was with baby William in tow, a cradle installed in the corner of the classroom where Olivia could tend to him between lessons. 3 years later, their family expanded again with the arrival of Emma Catherine, a delicate beauty with her father's sandy hair and her mother's thoughtful temperament. And in 1885, their youngest, Thomas Daniel, completed their family, a robust boy whose energy and curiosity kept his parents perpetually on their toes. Through it all, Wade remained the steady center of Olivia's world, supportive of her continued teaching, proud of her accomplishments, and unwavering in his devotion. As sheriff, He maintained peace in Marysville even as the town grew with the railroad's expansion, earning the respect of citizens and territorial officials alike. They never forgot the circumstances that had brought them together. Each year on the anniversary of Olivia's arrival in Marysville, they took a private moment to acknowledge the journey from her broken state to their shared happiness, from her fear to their enduring love. Do you ever regret it? Wade asked once, as they stood on the porch of their home watching their children play in the summer twilight. Coming to Marysville, I mean, choosing this life instead of returning to teaching in a city school. Olivia leaned against his shoulder, her hand finding his with the ease of long familiarity. Never, she replied without hesitation. This is where I was meant to be, Wade, with you, with our children in this community. Wade's arm tightened around her waist. Even when you insisted you were too broken to love again, a smile curved Olivia's lips at the memory. Especially then, she said softly, because you showed me that broken doesn't mean destroyed, it just means ready to be rebuilt, stronger than before. Wade turned her in his arms, his expression as tender as it had been on their wedding day 9 years earlier. I'd do it all again, he told her, every moment from carrying you to Mrs. Peterson's door to this very minute. As would I, Olivia agreed, rising on tiptoe to press her lips to his. Every single moment. Their children's laughter rang out across the yard, a joyful counterpoint to the deepening dusk. And as Olivia McCullough stood in her husband's embrace, surrounded by the life they had built together, she knew with absolute certainty that some broken things, when mended with love, became more beautiful than they had ever been before.